What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. For today's topic, we're going to be breaking down a topic that you all voted on about a month back or so. I'm going to be talking about why Killmonger is not the real villain of the first Black Panther movie, and who is the real villain of this movie. So let's get into it. By now, just about everybody has seen the first Black Panther movie, and most people have come to the consensus that Killmonger is actually not the real villain. There's only a select few people who actually still believe that he is, and at this point, it's even an unpopular opinion that someone would believe that he is actually the villain. But we need to talk about why he isn't and who instead is the villain, as I said, of this movie. When it comes to the Killmonger character, the reason why some people still believe that he is the villain of this movie is because they take his character more literally than symbolically, which is the main problem. In order to truly understand this character, you have to understand who he was comprised of. Killmonger is a combination of three different people or groups of people. He's a combination of Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party, and then foundational Black American men. The reason why these three things are important is because they were trying to tell multiple messages with this character throughout the story. And one of the big things that they were trying to do was demonize the revolutionary spirit and ideology of individuals such as, again, a Malcolm X and also of the Black Panther Party. These two either had the intellect and oration abilities to articulate what would be best to create Black unity, or they were actively doing things to create Black unity or Black empowerment, which is what the Killmonger character symbolized. Now, the foundational Black American male part comes into play because what they wanted to do also was demonize our specific lineage. And the way they did this is they do what they've done in a lot of different movies when they have Black characters, specifically Black male characters, and they make them part of what I call the beyond belief trope. This is when they make a Black male character who has certain points that they make throughout a movie or television show, whatever the case may be, and you find yourself listening to them sometimes and saying, you know, they kind of have a point here, or they kind of have a point there, or maybe they're not all the way bad, or there's something about them that they're saying that actually makes some sense. But in order to throw salt on it and to reel you back in so you do not think that this character is somebody who should be respected or even listened to, even if they're making a good point, they make them do something erratic. They make them do something crazy. They make them do something that is totally awful and immoral, that overshadows all of the points that they may be making, or any of the justifications behind their actual behavior, which could be legitimized to a certain extent. And they did this with the Killmonger character, especially when they killed the foundational Black American girlfriend. Marvel was essentially trying to send the message that we as foundational Black American men are individuals who, while we are filled with rage and are caught up in our rage, will end up doing it selfishly to the point where we're willing to off the Black female ride or dies who actually go along with what it is that we believe in and what it is that we will do. They basically were taking what they believe and what they want to project other people to believe about the Black men of Black American culture and portray it onto the Killmonger character, because think about it, Killmonger himself actually was FBA. So although he had the African lineage, he also had the foundational Black American lineage, with his mother being from Oakland, California. So this is very important. And a lot of people just took his character literally, and they focused on the idea that he was a character who was enraged and filled with anger and all of these other things. And to a certain extent, Marvel knew that this was not the direction that they wanted this character to go in. And if you look at other adaptations of this character, you see little by little that they are trying to go back towards this direction where they make him seem like he is more angry and enraged than empowered. And like I said, most people get this. The only people who really don't get this are those seat at the table Negroes who are more concerned about whining about how black people are not a monolith because they want to smash some white Latina. When it comes to the Killmonger character, once again, he is not the villain here because his mission ultimately was noble. What he was trying to do was create black empowerment, or at least this idea that black people are going to get their power back. But once again, Marvel was attempting to bastardize and also corrupt what it was that Killmonger was doing to make it seem like it was something that he went about the wrong way, or the way that he was doing it wasn't constructive, or the way he was doing it actually would end in violence and bloodshed and all this other stuff, when they're essentially trying to make it seem like there is no race war and he was creating one, almost to the point where they're trying to portray this message of if black people got in power, they could create this false idea of black supremacy, which is something that we simply cannot do. So they tried to portray that message through the Killmonger character, but again, it didn't land because most of us, and I'm going to be honest with you, even some people who were non-black picked up on the fact that Killmonger himself was a revolutionary character, and it's just as simple as that. Now, when it comes to the real villains of this movie, if I'm being honest, are the Wakandans. But I specifically, for the sake of this movie, want to focus on the women of Wakanda. And I'll give a little backstory too, just to fill you in on why I believe it's the Wakandans as a whole, but specifically major focus being put on the women of Wakanda and why this is super important. Now, let's be real. All of the Wakandans were kind of cooning to a certain extent. They all had some Sambo traits. So remember, in this movie, they had it where T'Challa was almost playing the role of a couple different things. He was a combination of Martin Luther King, Mansa Musa, Barack Obama, and to a certain extent, I'm going to add this one on, but I have not said this before up until this video, he was like a black millennial to a certain extent too. And I'm going to tell you why he was these four things. When it comes to him being Barack Obama, remember how the women of Wakanda, right before he was about to get clawed back or kill him or whatever he was going to do, they were saying, T'Challa, the world is watching. They started doing that shit like when they go low, we go high. They started doing that Michelle Obama bullshit that I don't get with. And they ultimately did this because there is this restraint that is basically upheld by either the Marvel creators or the characters in this movie. You could say both, maybe even, where they do not want to off white characters for the bad things that they do, but they're willing to off black characters for the bad things that they do. Hence, even when you go back to the Kings of Wakanda, why T'Chaka said that it was time for N'Jabu to be offed because of the way that he betrayed the Wakandan Empire. And also, too, to show how T'Challa was told that he needed to get rid of Killmonger because of everything he was trying to do. Whenever somebody who is black does something that is considered bad, even if there is a good cause behind it, they have to go. But whenever somebody white or non-black does something in this series, then it's seen as something where they just need to get taken in, or they need to just be brought to the Empire, or they just need to be stopped but not killed, and violence is just bad. And they did this in multiple instances and have let a lot of white characters who have done terrible things to the Wakandans and actually killed members of them to they have letting them gotten away. They've gotten away. Think about when Baron Zemo ended up offing T'Chaka. Think about when Namor ended up getting rid of the Queen Ramonda, that is. Think about when Claw had offed all of those Wakandans when he was going on a pursuit to get his revenge on the Wakandan Empire, and also when he was hired to basically take them out, get the vibranium and all this other stuff. So despite the fact that he did all of this and that all these other people did all the things that they did, there was never a mission to get rid of them. It was only a mission to either bring them in or to stop them from their tyranny. Hell, even in the case of Namor, it led to a black and brown coalition. Let's be real. With T'Chaka, he was trying to keep a watchful eye on what was going on in the rest of the world and if they knew about the secrets of Wakanda and all this other stuff. So they almost were trying to take somewhat of a North Sentinel Island approach, where you have these black people who really ain't trying to be bothered with any Western powers or any white supremacy or anything like that. So they're kind of tucked away. Anybody comes on the island and they're done for, basically. He was kind of taking that approach to a certain extent, but a softer approach than that. And it easily turned into a big old Sambo fest, because you had it where N'Jabu was selling him out because he was trying to take the resources, and most likely he was doing that because he saw that T'Chaka was a weak king who did not care about black empowerment, whereas he did care about black empowerment, so he was selling him out. So this is parallel to a lot of the tribalism that exists in the diaspora. So that's basically what that was a symbol of. And then you had it where, again, N'Jabu was trying to create black empowerment. So now they're taking this character and making him now a symbol of black empowerment. And if you think about it, T'Chaka wasn't behind what he was trying to do by empowering the black people in the United States, that being foundational black Americans. So his thing was, it's time for N'Jabu to go. So that's why I said that they all were kind of Samboing to a certain extent. So if anything, they are the ringleaders and starters of this, because the reality is that even if the women are in, his ear, in these kings' ears and things like that, they're the individuals who are supposed to lead the charge. They're the individuals who are supposed to put their foot down. They're supposed to lead with power, and they're supposed to do empowering things. So in other words, there was a good first step by saying, hey, we want to isolate. But where things should have been different is they should have allowed other black people all across the globe to be able to become one big power that was isolated from the rest of society. So in other words, they both had good points, but they went about it in bad ways because they both were samboing against each other. Now let's go to the women of Wakanda, and I'm going to tell you why they were the villains of this movie. The true villains, that is. Ultimately, the Black Panther movie was centering around this idea of black empowerment and different perspectives on black empowerment. And the reality is that these women were not concerned about black empowerment whatsoever, or any aspect that actually is important when it comes to black empowerment. My first problem with the women of Wakanda is that they were clearly trying to undermine black empowerment by either trying to advocate for a black and brown coalition or a black resource coalition where other nations were getting a hold of Wakanda's resources, or they simply weren't on the train of trying to avenge those who have fallen because of a white supremacist or because of somebody who was not black. They were trying to basically either create some type of harmony with other people who were non-black, or they were trying to basically stop anybody who was a part of the Wakandan Empire from basically getting rid of anybody who was white or who was non-black. Think about when Nakia kept putting a bug in T'Challa's ear and really at a certain point just straight up whining about it, about how T'Challa should share the Wakandan resources with the rest of the world to help out other people who were suffering. This closely mirrors what you see today, where a lot of times when it comes to some of these shea butter samblers, they get into this space where they believe that they are doing something noble by trying to help everybody. It's the feminine spirit to feel for other people. And really, it's the spirit as black people to really care about what happens with everybody else except us. It's this whole thing of creating this "we are one" coalition. We are the world. And so in this, Nakia was going against black empowerment because the idea is that the only reason why they were so tucked away in the first place is because, the other kings were already aware that there was a lot of colonization of Wakanda's resources. So the idea that they would share it with people who were already proven untrustworthy was them going directly against what the kings wanted and why they were isolating in the first place. Because once again, there was a reason why this was actually being done. It wasn't a foolproof plan, but it was much better than just saying, you know what, let's just give all of our shit to our enemies, because that's essentially what Nakia was advocating for. And that's why she told T'Challa to share the resources. They have this thing where they like to take black people all over the globe and then make them more interested in the problems of other people around them than themselves, which is why there wasn't any focus on black unity. If anything, the attention was being taken off of it. What it shows you is that these shea butter sambas, as I said, lack vision. And as a result of lacking vision, they care more about trying to find comfort in a system of white supremacy than they do actually trying to solve a real problem and create power for black people. The second reason why I say the women of Wakanda were the biggest problems was because think about the character of Okoye. She was this beloved character, but ultimately she was very resistant and rebellious against her husband Wakabi and the problems that he had and some of the things that he had suffered with. So for those of you all who don't remember, Wakabi's family, they were unalived by Claw, and he basically wanted revenge. He said that Claw basically has to go because Claw is a cancer. And so because Claw is a suspected white supremacist, it actually makes sense. But she was more hell-bent on him possibly trying to get revenge than she was trying to support her husband in his plight. And the reality was that Claw did need to go, because Claw was only there because it was known to him that his great-grandfather was unalived by a Black Panther in the 19th century. So what it shows you is that he most likely had an ancestor who probably was some type of slave owner, was some type of white supremacist back in the day, terrorizing some African slaves or black slaves, and they got with his ass. So his revenge is actually probably based on the fact that he is upset that a colonizer got taken down. Let's be real. So Claw basically is a suspected white supremacist because he's trying to avenge a colonizer, and he's trying to steal Wakanda's resources for profits, because that's exactly what he did. When T'Chaka actually got rid of N'Jabu, what did he do with the Wakandan resources, the vibranium that he actually stole? He actually took that and he sold it for profit, because now there was no N'Jabu to give these resources to. I mean, it was to the point where Okoye literally was saying that she would be willing to unalive her own husband just for Wakanda's silly plan to get rid of Killmonger, who was trying to create black empowerment and also was trying to get rid, and as a matter of fact did get rid of the individual who took out Wakabi's family. She was trying to make it seem like she was trying to be loyal to the Wakandan Empire, but because the Wakandan Empire was led by Killmonger, she actually was going against the Wakandan Empire and what had been created and what had been established. And that brings me into my next point. The women of Wakanda were treasonous. The minute that Killmonger had become king and had took the throne, they were supposed to serve their king. But they actually were staging a coup so that they could try to get T'Challa back to try to fight Killmonger and whatnot. So they essentially were already being rebellious against him. And what this shows you is that as long as they have somebody there who they cannot control and they cannot tell what to do and they cannot browbeat and they cannot question every decision that they make, then they have to go, because they were able to do that with the kings, or at least they were not really happy with what the kings were doing because they wanted the resources shared. And then in the case with T'Challa, they were able to control him like a little puppet. And the reason why that's important to note is because, again, I said T'Challa to a certain extent is like 4 different people. Earlier, I had described how he's kind of like Barack Obama because of the fact that, they were like T'Challa, the world is watching. I also said Mansa Musa because, once again, he is very, very rich, just like Mansa Musa was a rich man in Africa, the richest man in Africa that has been known to man, as a matter of fact. And then I said he also was like Martin Luther King because they try to create the contrast of Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King by having T'Challa versus Killmonger. And the last thing I said, which is why I brought this up, is the fact that he was almost like a black millennial as well too. When it comes to us as black millennials, we are the generation of confused empowerment. We don't know which way to go. We don't know, a lot of us don't know whether or not we want to advocate solely for black people. We want to advocate just for everybody. We just want to be totally separated from it. So there's a level of confusion because other generations have set a poor example of the way that we should create empowerment for ourselves. And as black people, it's even worse because now we're confused even about what a lot of them have done and how a lot of them have actually sold us out. So that's why it's important for us to understand that the T'Challa character is a character that can be controlled easily because he is already confused about what happened. Think about it. He didn't know what the other kings had done to wrong Killmonger. He didn't know if he wanted to go with what the women of Wakanda were suggesting he do by sharing the resources. He didn't understand what Killmonger's plight was. He was confused by every single thing that was in front of him. And that's because, again, he represented the black millennial where we're like, what the hell do we do? I mean, I got people from multiple sides saying, you don't go about it this way, don't go about it that way. But then I know that we're in a dire situation where we have to kind of tuck away and we're not able to be this upfront power that we know that we are with all these great resources. There's a reason why we're tucking away. But what is the solution? What's the best thing to do? We're always looking for that. So T'Challa was that person, and the Wakandan women were easily able to control him. So anybody who they couldn't control, they had to go. And that's why they actually turned their backs on Killmonger while he was king. And it's a shame too, because everything that Killmonger had said and everything Killmonger was trying to do and tried to prevent actually ended up coming to fruition. And think about it. The women of Wakanda in the second Black Panther movie were basically dealing with the problems that Killmonger was trying to prevent. And that ultimately they started up as a result of browbeating T'Challa into sharing the resources of Wakanda with the rest of the nation. So it was like this idea of them basically taking attention off of the fact that they missed the big picture and they put it on something else. And again, that mirrors society quite a bit because, again, you have the Shea Butter Samba class who they love to do things because they love this art of being posturing. They love to be impressionable. It's like a currency to them. To look good, to have a great aesthetic is something that's important to them, not actual substance. So in this movie, in the very beginning, the second one now I'm kind of going into, they were more concerned about putting out fires and creating aesthetics of being powerful women than they were actually looking at the big picture of what actually went wrong. And that being that they were opening their fucking mouths telling all of the men to basically share their resources. And look what they got. A bunch of French white supremacists who were infiltrating Wakanda to try to take their resources. And now they want to try to look cool for taking them down in a problem that they actually started. You want brownie points for trying to get rid of a problem that you started, that you don't have to, and that you never had to. That's ridiculous. My point here with all this, y'all, is that when it comes to the Black Panther series, if they would have just listened to Killmonger, then black folks would have been united. They didn't like the aggressiveness. They didn't like the anger. They didn't like the fact that he was willing to off people. But the reality is that even when it came to getting rid of certain folks and things like that, what Killmonger was trying to do was run Sambo damage control. What I mean by that was ultimately he was getting rid of everybody who he knew or he perceived was going to Sambo. What he didn't really see, though, was that the women of Wakanda that were underneath him were going to try to find a way to revive T'Challa and do all this other stuff underneath him. The villains are ultimately the Wakandans, because what people don't realize is that the women of Wakanda and the past kings were really just Sambos. But the way they tried to picture them in this movie is as if they are a powerful nation of blacks, specifically Africans, who have every intention to create empowerment for black people, when ultimately this was never the goal. And that goal especially ended when they got rid of Killmonger. All right, y'all. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come. So make sure that you stay tuned. If you like this video, I would love it if you liked it, subscribed, shared, and also hit the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.